On our first episode of Between Two Palms here, and we're going to start by asking you a very simple question, sir. What is your name?
Radford Sturgis, but I go by Rad. It rhymes with bad.
Should I call you Judge or Red during this interview?
Both.
All right, Judge. What was your primary area of practice when you were practicing law?
Well, I started off in the state attorney's office for about 5.5 years and then went into private practice. And I tried to represent people who didn't have a prior record. I felt a lot better about helping them out, and I was able to try to solicit some work from the law firms to try to take care of their folks.
All right, Judge. So when did you move to Southwest Florida, and what's the biggest change that you've seen since you've been here?
I was in law school, and we had a program for students, and Fort Myers had the reputation for being a place where you could go and actually get some trial experience. So I came down to Fort Myers and stayed here 3 months, liked it, had to take care of some military obligations, and Joe D'Alessandro hired me to come here. What's changed? Everything. I mean, I've been here over 50, I just celebrated 50 years in the bar. So I've been here forever. Everything's changed. The whole downtown has changed. The way the court system works has changed. Nothing but change.
Well, congratulations on more than 50 years with the bar. You mentioned that you worked with Mr. D'Alessandro at the state attorney's office. Is there any particular reason why you chose to go into litigation and particularly criminal law?
Well, when I came down, the internship was, as I said, with the state attorney, so I was doing criminal cases, and I really enjoyed that. I like building something rather than tearing it apart, and so that's why I became a prosecutor.
Okay. So what ultimately made you decide to become a lawyer?
Well, I went off to Florida State and had the ambition to study economics, and I was talking with the guidance counselor, and she was telling me about it, and I said, "You mean I got to take all them foreign languages?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, is there a school up here where I don't have to take foreign language?" She said, "Yeah, the School of Business." I said, "Sign me up." She said, "Well, do you want to major in marketing or management or whatever?" And I said, "Well, isn't there some course where I can take a little bit of everything?" She said, "Yeah, there's a pre-law program." I said, "Sign me up." So when I graduated, Florida State Law School was only about 2 years in existence. I applied, I barely got in, but I finished well because I studied hard.
Now, you mentioned that you went to Florida State, so I got to jump in and ask you, how do you feel about the selection committee and the snubbing of the undefeated Power 5 conference champ Florida State Seminoles?
Well, our defense was absolutely amazing, and our offense from the quarterback position was absolutely pathetic. And I had a nightmare about playing Georgia or Michigan or somebody in the finals, and we had that kind of offense. We couldn't score a first down after five different 3-and-outs. So I'm not angry about it. I think jumping from 4 to 12 is quite a jump. I would have rather they went to 8 if they were going to make a move. But somebody's always going to complain.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do? Georgia was in there all along, the whole year. Strongest team, I think, and they're out. So how can we complain? And now we got to play them.
All right, so jumping back into more law-related questions, can you tell us what accomplishment you're most proud of? Well, I guess you don't have to limit that to the profession, but.
Well, as a judge, I tried really hard to improve the system, and police officers were coming to court 4 or 5 times a month. So I developed the officer court date system, which was to let the officer assign on the traffic ticket his 2 court dates a month, or 1. And that really cut down on the officers wasting time and sitting in the courtroom. I also took the Citizens Dispute Settlement Program and turned it into the Voluntary Mediation Program and brought the mediators into the courtroom. And after I did that for a while, the other county judges picked up on it, and we really developed a strong voluntary mediation.
Now, is that in relation to small claims cases where you
Yes.
have the pretrial mediation conference that's,
Yes,
that's
and the
required?
mediators would go in before the judge would even come in to take care of it. And then Judge Reese assigned me to start the Juvenile Justice Council for the juveniles, and we had a major problem back at the time. And that was a very rewarding experience to get the community, the various leaders of the community all working together on the juvenile issues.
Now, this might jump around a little bit, but you mentioned that you've been practicing here for 50 years and that you've seen a lot of change. Is there one positive change that you might be able to talk about and maybe one negative change that you've seen over the years?
Well, the most positive change to me is not really related to the court system, and it's the ability to walk around with a device that has all the case law and access to the internet and your closing argument. And I mean, boy, these lawyers have it good, you know. They can take everything with them. I had notebooks that I had to carry around. So that to me was the biggest change, and there's more change coming.
Have you seen, or have you yourself seen a drastic change in the use of technology in the courtroom, and has that aided lawyers and judges in trying cases?
I would say yes and no, because sometimes technology really makes things more difficult. For example, I came in as a senior judge, and they didn't have the orders ready for me to sign, and therefore I had to come back the next day to sign the orders, which the judge, who was regularly assigned, would sign them the next day here at the courthouse. So that was a real problem. But other than that, yeah, it's been some major improvement.
Interesting. So can you tell us what is the best advice that you received, legal or otherwise?
The best advice I ever received is if you're ever presented with an ethical question and you have to decide whether or not you're going to do it, don't do it. That's the best rule.
So if you think you're towing the line, don't toe the line. Just do what's best, right?
Well, the fact that you're having to throw it back and forth reminds me of Flip Wilson, you know, with the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other, and he's debating it back and forth. But most ethical questions really aren't debatable if you get right to it. You're better off just not going that way.
This might be related. What was your most valuable learning experience?
Wow. I think most valuable learning experience was when I was in law school and I got a chance to do an internship in Jacksonville, and primarily we were watching the lawyers try cases. It was Harry Shorstein and Hugh Cotney and some other folks, and that was a tremendous incentive to be a lawyer in court, was to watch them work. And I'd be persuaded by the first argument, then I'd be persuaded by the counter argument, and then I'd be persuaded by the final argument. And that to me, showed me just how dramatic an argument can be made in court.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to today's world where we don't have to show up to court as often or at all. I haven't been to Lee County Courthouse probably since COVID happened, and most of it's because everything's by Zoom these days, which I don't know if you can opine on this, but I think, based on your experiences seeing other lawyers try cases, that's how I learned a lot as a young lawyer too. I feel like young lawyers are losing out on that experience a little bit.
Once again, there's that technology question. Of course, this was brought about by necessity, and I never participated in the Zoom at the courthouse, but I have done Zoom through my church because, tried to avoid COVID. And so Zoom is amazing. It has tremendous possibilities. And I have a Bible study where one of the fellows moved to South Carolina. He's right there every week. So you don't lose people. You can track them.
What is the greatest hurdle you've had to overcome, and how did you overcome it?
I think most people will tell you that they have a little bit of stage fright, and being nervous was something I worried about. And I used to really worry about getting presented with something that I didn't know anything about. And the longer I became a judge, the more I wanted to be presented by something that I had never heard of, so it would be exciting and challenging.
That's fascinating because in my experience before you and just knowing you personally, you don't come across as a person that is an introvert at all.
Oh no, there's nothing introverted about me.
I would imagine that you were very comfortable in your presentation and you wouldn't be nervous to speak.
After a while,
Yeah.
but it needed to sort of become natural, because there's a stage fright. I mean, even today, there's always a little bit of consternation about performing, so to speak.
Now, Biff, I guess we're going to start going into some funny questions too. But is there a lawyer that you've gone head to head against that you just have the highest respect and opinion of, who's giving you a run for your money, that you're like, man, that's a good lawyer. He was tough.
Well, may he rest in peace, but my very first case, my very first trial was Pat Garrity. And Pat Garrity was one of the finest lawyers that I ever had a chance to be around, and he was tremendously excellent at his profession. I also went up against Judge Schoonover when he was up in Charlotte County, had to prosecute a case against him, and that was pretty formidable. So I'd say those were the two best that I went up against.
That's awesome. Thanks for answering that. I actually worked with Kelly Garrity, Kelly Price. And she was what do they say? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. She's a very good trial lawyer too. So definitely have a lot of respect for that family. All right, so let's get into some fun questions. Where do you go for lunch when you're at the courthouse?
Well, back in the day, it was May's. It was a seafood place, but that went away. Unfortunately, a lot of these restaurants came and went, and I don't really have a favorite. Tried to vary it, but if you went out east, you could get some good Jamaican food, and I think that was one of my favorite places to go. Farmers market, always good.
All right. What do you do in your spare time?
In my spare time, I spent a great deal of time on the internet. I had to manage my mom and dad's estate. Now I'm trying to keep mine out of trouble. I enjoy reading the Bible and Bible study, and I play a little golf, play at golf. A little right, a little left, sometimes down the middle.
They call golf practicing like they do the practice of law.
Yeah, I'm not sure which is worse. I've heard it said that the only thing that is as hard as playing golf is maybe understanding women. That's a real challenge.
Have you figured either of those out yet?
Oh no, but I figured enough out to give my son a head start. And I wish I knew when I was younger what I've learned the hard way now.
Don't we all?
What was that?
Is that cracking the glass?
Oh shoot, it did.
Wow. I thought it was electrical.
I was looking for a spark.
No, I might have to get a new glass for this table
gosh.
here.
That's a
Hey, I'll do it.
Proposition.
that's a $500 piece of glass.
Ugh.
Probably.
Well,
It ain't
Nice.
going anywhere.
all right. I just don't want anybody. Just be careful.
Well, sorry about that. All right, what's your favorite book? Is it the Bible?
Yeah.
That's a good
It's an
answer.
amazing book. It's a book not only about history and the future, but it's a recipe for living, about getting along with other people, about understanding where people are coming from. And I felt more than anything else, because I'd always ask for wisdom before I'd take the bench, that the Bible helped me deal with people and understand where they were coming from and try to treat people fairly, better than any other book I ever read.
So along that same vein, do you have a favorite scripture?
Wow. Well, the book of Romans and the book of John are probably my two favorites, but saying I have a favorite scripture, that'd be really hard to tie down. There's so many.
Is there any particular passage or sequence of passages that perplexes you the most about the Bible? Things that you have questions.
Just go turn to Revelations and spend a little time there.
Yeah.
That's very perplexing. But the way I figure it is that we're on a need-to-know basis. And that God can see over the hill, we can't. But as we grow, we maybe get a little bit of a peek or a glimpse of what's on the other side of the hill. And what we can't see, we need to trust and figure He's in control. In fact, that's man's biggest problem, is we want to be in control. And we have to realize that we're not in control.
So what is your favorite movie?
Oh, man, that's an easy question. I love One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That was terrific. And my cousin Vinny, I can watch that movie time and time again.
Spoken like a true
Was it
lawyer.
Marissa Tomei and her description of that automobile?
That was an awesome
Oh,
movie.
man.
Utes guys. Hey, Utes. Have you ever had a lawyer show up in your courtroom in attire like my cousin Vinny had on?
No, but Sawyer Smith showed up wearing a gator shirt. and being a Seminole, I said, we ought to prosecute him for wearing that shirt.
Hey.
But you can't do it because you never find that it was worth anything.
Be nice. Be nice.
All my family's Gators. My nephew was a Gator, kicked for Florida, and then he kicked for Miami, and then Philadelphia.
Yep, I remember.
So I got nothing but Gators around me.
One piece of advice that you like to share with the ends.
I think the best advice I ever got was from Martin Luther King, and he says, "It's never a wrong time to do the right thing." So whenever one has the opportunity, and you can make a difference or do something right, don't pass it up.
Now, what's the funniest experience that you've ever had in the practice of law?
Well, actually my funniest experience has been on the bench, but I was in the courtroom and probably started off with 300 people at arraignment. It was down to 200. And this fella comes up in front of me and tells me the most outlandish, prevaricated story I think I've ever heard. I said, "Sir, I don't believe a word of what you said, but I'm a fair man. And if anybody in this courtroom buys your story, I'll give you a pass." One guy in the back of the courtroom raised his hand. I said, "Oh, I'm in trouble. Sir, are you telling me that you believed his story?" He said, "No, Judge, I didn't believe a word of it, but if you don't believe his story, there's no way you're going to believe mine."
That's phenomenal.
I like that.
True story.
Wow. Can you think of any differences between practicing in Lee or Collier County, and if so, what?
I went to Collier County a lot. I went down as a prosecutor, and I went down as a judge and tried cases. And I really respect both bars, and Collier County always treated me very nicely. And they found me a little different, and I'd go sit down at a table and we work out stuff with the lawyers, whereas sometimes the judges down there were kind of stiff on the bench. They kind of like that free and loose approach of just sitting down and reasoning things out together. So I was able to work out a lot of cases by going to Collier County. I enjoyed that.
What is your biggest pet peeve?
Well, my number one pet peeve is any lawyer that uses the term "with all due respect," because they heard that on Law and Order, and it's anything but. But I don't like liars. I really don't like bullies, and I can't stand assholes.
It's like that. With all due respect, that's like
That drives me. That drives me plain up a wall. And John Coleman used to be. Don't put that on. But he used to be the one that said that all the time, and I'd call him on it. I said, "John, now you're not telling me you respect it at all."
yeah, that's like a preference of giving the middle finger to somebody, right?
It is.
Or signing off on sincerest regards. Or my worst is govern yourself accordingly.
Oh,
Yes.
I hated when I first started practicing law. I had every lawyer used to put that in the letters at the end. I'm like, why are you guys telling me to govern myself accordingly?
yeah.
I
I
am.
wouldn't be here if you could govern yourself.
Exactly. All right. What do you prefer? Star Wars, Star Trek, Dancing with the Stars, none, or
None of 'em.
don't know what you're talking about?
No, I basically quit watching regular TV years ago, and pretty much subscribe to things on the internet to watch. There's some good British shows, some great detective and drama shows from Britain.
What is your most memorable case, and
Oh,
what case in your county overall is most memorable?
well, I had a case of first impression. the legislature had passed a law that made it a crime for a doctor to be culpably negligent. And I got the first case probably in the state of Florida. It's a doctor named Ali Azima. And what made it even more interesting was Larry Justin had to go up against Ellis Rubin, the Twinkie lawyer from the East Coast. So the doctor had misdiagnosed an ectopic pregnancy, which is where the pregnancy, I think, takes place in the tube instead of lower, and the lady could have died. And but for a few events that were able to rectify the situation, she would have died. The jury found him guilty. So as far as I know, that was the first doctor in the state of Florida ever convicted of criminal negligence. That was quite different.
Now, what's the last thing you posted on social media, if anything?
I don't post.
No tweets, no Facebook posts, nothing
I
like
don't buy
that.
lottery tickets and I don't tweet.
Westlaw or LexisNexis?
What's what?
Westlaw or Lexis?
Or ChatGPT.
I never really used either one of them, to tell you the truth, because I did my own research. I told you after Schoonover caught me that one time on a case, I read every advance sheet and spent a lot of time organizing my notebooks. So I didn't used to have to go to LexisNexis. I just go to my notebooks.
That reminds me of Ed Sheffy told me once. He said the lawyer that prepares the most is the one that wins. Do you think that has some credence?
Well, you can't say anything for sure, but I would think that your odds are better. It's like the guy that gets up there and practices hitting home runs is more likely to hit one, isn't he, than the guy that doesn't.
I think so.
So I got to think there's a relationship.
Any thoughts on AI in 10 words or less? Or you can use more words if you want to.
It's just it's wonderful and it's frightening, and it remains to be seen. But it's like anything else in life. Things can be used for good or they can be used for bad. I guess the best example is a surgeon's knife. It can save someone's life or take someone's life with a knife.
Now, when you were on the bench, did you have the opportunity to have hearings by Zoom, or was it all in person?
I don't think I pretty much quit coming to senior judge when the COVID hit, so I did not do Zoom from the bench. So I don't have any experience.
Do you have any funny stories of judges getting caught with something under their robes other than pants?
There were rumors that some judges went to court in their underwear. But I never knew any of that for truth.
You can tell me to cut that one out. I don't care.
Yeah, you cut that one.
Does the gavel work at home with the family, or does it only work in the courthouse?
I want to tell you something. I was a judge for God knows how many years, the 29 plus the 5, and I never once banged my gavel. Never. But I did have a petrified wood gavel that probably weighed about 4 pounds, and that was going to be my defense if someone had charged the bench. Could have whaled them with that. Never used a gavel, but they do it on the TV every time they do anything. And I guess I had such a loud projecting voice, I didn't need a gavel.
Did you ever have anybody charge the bench, or ever have a situation where your bailiffs had to jump in and grab somebody?
I did not, but not because people didn't want to. But I had to deal with the bailiffs, and it was nonverbal communication with the bailiff. And if I was concerned, my first look would be for the bailiff to walk over and stand near the guy. And my second look would be for the bailiff to put his hand in the guy's back and whisper in his ear. And we didn't get to 3. Those first 2 usually took care of the problem. But Judge Hayes, I believe, jumped over the bench once during his career.
I've heard a couple of those stories in my time. Judge, do you have any children?
I have one, and he is not a lawyer. He's working with Apple. He's out on the I don't say that. He's out on the West Coast. He's working real hard at coding, which is, boy, I bet that's some kind of experience.
Did you try and push him into law?
Not at all.
How did he feel about having a father that was a judge?
Well, I tell you, the funny thing is, I had a reputation for being able to ascertain the truth when people were talking to me. So my son found out real early in life it didn't pay to lie to me. And I guess the funniest experience was he took off for his little prom, with the high school, and then he came back to the house. They rented a limo, and he came back to the house. And I said, Sky, what'd you come back for? He said, oh, I forgot my belt. I said, no, you mean you forgot your alcohol? He said, how did you know, Dad?
Can't pull that one over on you.
No, he couldn't pull that on me.
Anything that we haven't asked you that you'd like to talk to about the ends of court during our joint presentation in February?
I think we kind of quit doing that for a couple of years, and we have that joint meeting. And I'm really glad to hear that it's back. And I think the relationship between lawyers is so important, and it makes life easier for the judge and also certainly for all the people that come in front, and gives them a stronger feeling about the court system, and that they're going to get justice when folks get along and do things the right way.
Completely agree. Any other questions? No? Okay. You're off the hook. Thank you so much.
Now for the cross-examination.
Yeah.
So I had the exact
Fellow
opposite
Seminoles.
experience.
Oh, you're still grieving like me?
No,